This is Ron Pramschufer, and welcome to Publishing Basics Radio, where weekly we help you navigate the self-publishing minefield. Publishing Basics Radio is sponsored by selfpublishing.com, the Internet's only self-publishing superstore. Think you're ready to publish a book? Try selfpublishing.com. Now on with the program. Today we're talking with Patricia Fry, the author of How to Write a Successful Book Proposal in 8 Days or Less. Hi, Pat, and welcome to Publishing Basics Radio.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So this may sound a little bit silly, but what exactly is a book proposal?
Well, that isn't silly. A lot of people want to know what a book proposal is, and I tell them that it's a business plan for your book. And that's when I get a scrunched up face. A business plan related to writing, it does not compute for most people, but people need to understand that a book is a product, and your book proposal is your plan for producing and selling your product.
Okay, so when do you start writing? When do you start working on a book proposal?
I recommend that people start the book proposal, write the book proposal first before they ever start writing the book. And this is especially true for nonfiction books. And the reason is that you want to make sure that one reason is that a publisher is going to at some point request that book proposal. Even if you aren't planning to go with a publisher, you want a book proposal for yourself to help you write that book. And you want to write the right book, and a book proposal can help with that as well.
Okay. Now, one thing, I did read your book. I thought it was great. Okay, and that's one of the main reasons why we're talking here today. I mean, I highly recommend it to people. What is your definition of self-publishing?
Well, self-publishing, that's another term that people are confused about these days, because sometimes a fee-based POD publisher will say that they're going to help you self-publish your book. When I was in St. Louis this weekend doing a book festival and a workshop there for writers, and a gentleman kept using the term, I'm a self-publisher. I self-published with blank blank POD publishing company. And but to self-publish, the original term and the standby term that I stand by is that you set up your own publishing company. You are the business manager. You purchase the International Standard Book Number, which you've probably also heard referred to as ISBN. Mm-hmm. You purchase the barcode. You arrange for your book design and the cover design, and you set the price. You choose the title. You're in charge. It's your company. And that is the definition that I use of self-publishing.
Okay. In other words, you are the publisher, self-publishing.
Yes. Absolutely.
All right. Now, I've already made up my mind. I mean, everybody knows how hard it is to get a book produced by a traditional publisher. So say you're shortcut and you've already made up your mind you're going to self-publish. Why would I bother writing a book proposal if I'm going to self-publish anyway?
That's an excellent question, and something else that confuses people a lot of times. A book proposal helps you to decide, as I said earlier, whether or not you actually have a book, whether or not you have an audience for your book, if there's a market for this book. Is the market saturated with books on this topic? If it is, you might not want to produce the book the way you originally envisioned it. You may instead want to tweak it a little bit so that it is a book with an audience and there is a market for it, and there isn't so much competition that your book's going to be unnoticed. A book proposal has a lot of facets. A book proposal will tell you whether or not you have a book.
You were talking about basically the book proposal is a marketing plan. Okay, and I teach a little, learning annex course where, the first line of the course is writing's a love, publishing's a business. And, the idea of having a business plan for your book is, I mean, you have a business plan for any other kind of business you get into. Like, why wouldn't you as a self-publisher?
Exactly. You can waste an awful lot of time and money if you don't have that plan in place before you start.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I tell people, there's nothing wrong with it if there's only a market for, 100 books, only do 100 books. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think you're going to go on to, fame and fortune, you better, you're the publisher. You, self-publisher, are the publisher, so you've got to look at you, the author, as you would if any other publisher would look at you.
Yes, and this weekend when I was talking to someone about a book proposal, they said, well, how can a book proposal tell you all of those things? And I said, well, once you understand the components of a book proposal and what you need to, the questions you need to answer, the research you need to do in order to put this book proposal together, then once you have accomplished all of that, you will understand whether or not you have a book.
You spoke of components, so what are the main components of a book proposal?
They're a little bit different for a nonfiction book as opposed to a fiction book. There are fewer parts to a book proposal for a fiction book, and not all publishers are going to want to see a book proposal for a fiction book. Mm-hmm. But I still recommend that you put one together for yourself. For a nonfiction book, the book proposal should include a cover letter, which is kind of a given, a title page, just so you have something which includes, by the way, your projected number of words. Usually you're going to determine your projected number of words. That'll be on the title page. Mm-hmm. You'll want a table of contents for the book.
Okay.
You'll want a synopsis, which is an overview of the book that you plan. A promotional plan, which would include who you feel is your target audience and what is the best way to reach them. Mm-hmm. And if you can come up with some statistics, for instance, you're writing a book related to dog grooming. How many dog owners are there? How many pet groomers are there? How many people take their dogs to groomers? You want to have some statistics to show the publisher and for yourself. So this is where that information would go. Mm-hmm. Market analysis. You're going to compare your book idea with other books that are out there on the market. An honest appraisal analysis is going to be very important to a book proposal. This part you probably don't need so much for yourself as you do a publisher, about the author. What makes you the ideal person to write this particular book? And what is your writing experience?
Okay.
Then you'll want a chapter outline, and this would be tiny synopsis for each chapter, mm-hmm. and possibly sample chapters.
All right. Now, is there any one part that's more important than the other?
That would probably be the promotional plan, and the publisher in particular, and you, if you are the self-publisher, should also want this information. Publisher will want to know what his bottom line is on this. This is what he's concerned with. He wants a book that's going to make him money. And so whether or not there's a market for this book will help him to recognize whether or not he can make money on it, how widespread that market is, and what you are willing to do to help promote the book, what your background is for promoting the book.
So that should give not only him, it should give you a good idea whether you can make money with the book then, too, if you do it correctly.
That's true.
Now, what is you mentioned a synopsis. What all goes into a synopsis?
It basically is an overview of your book. It will tell the publisher what kind of a book this is, what the book's about, what kind of a story your book is telling, for instance, what the focus and scope of your book is, who's your audience, why you decided to write this book. In the case of my book on youth mentoring, mm-hmm. I decided to write this book because I saw that there was a real need for it, and I explained to the publisher why I felt there was a need for this book. So that's an important element to have written into your synopsis. You'll also want to share with the publisher what the tone you'll be using what tone you will be using throughout your book. what style, what is the tone of the book.
To try to get, and the idea is to try to have him have a feel of what the book is going to be like without you actually writing it first.
That's right, and you'll embed this within your synopsis. Why do you think people will be interested in this book is something else that you'll want to include in there, and what makes your book different, interesting, and worthwhile. Of course, some of these questions will be answered in other parts of the book proposal, but if you can touch on those in your synopsis, I think you're ahead of the game, and I think if the publisher goes no further, at least you have that information there for him.
Now, how long is a synopsis? I mean, does it sound, just listen to you tell me what's included there, it seems like I could go on for like thousands of words.
Well, it does sound like it, but you want it to encompass probably a page and a half to 2 pages. However, some people think that you should have as many as 10 pages in the synopsis. I suppose it would depend on the complexity of your book, but you do have, remember, your chapter outline, which is going to have a small synopsis of each chapter. So you really don't need to go on. And if you are just going on and on, then you definitely want to shorten it.
Okay, I mean, the idea is just like this radio show, we don't want people turning it off, because they're like falling asleep. I mean, you don't want to lose the editor before you've gotten to the meat. Right? Now, you referred to the one-sentence challenge. What's that all about?
Oh, my gosh, I think this is so important. So many times we just don't have a lot of time to talk to someone about our book. And this would be whether you are approaching a publisher with your book idea and you want to hook him without spending a lot of time because he may not have a lot of time. This also comes in handy when you are promoting your book and somebody says, well, what have you been doing lately? Or what is your book about? You want to create one sentence or in some cases, a 30-second little spiel so that you can quickly get the point across what your book is about. And if that person is interested, they'll open it up so that you can tell more. But this is going to be your hook to grab that publisher or that customer.
Okay, like you mentioned you wrote a book or you had published a book on mentoring. What's your one-sentence challenge on that book?
The books that I am promoting really heavy right now are my writing-related books and my publishing-related books.
How about how to write a successful book in 8 days or less? What's the one-sentence challenge on that one?
Well, this book is a definitive, no-nonsense, easy-to-follow guide to writing a winning book proposal. That's one thing I could say. For my book on book promotion, I have a little book called Over 75 Good Ideas for Promoting Your Book. And I say for that book, it is a collection of low and no-cost ideas for promoting your book.
Oh, there we go. Well, that brings me back to the next question. The promotion plan. Speaking of promoting your book, what all goes into a promotion plan?
Well, you'll want to explain to the publisher what your expertise is in promoting. For instance, if you are a Toastmaster and you are constantly giving speeches as a Toastmaster and as a book promoter. If you give speeches as part of your work, perhaps you have a job and this is one of your elements of your job is to give speeches, then that's something you'll want to explain in your promotions piece for your book proposal. I worked with a woman recently who had a book that she was getting ready to bring out. She put in her book proposal that she was going to put on a huge conference and have about the topic of her book and have celebrities there because this was such a hot topic. She said that she was going to go around and teach all over the United States. And so I said, okay, now we need to, this is really good stuff, but now we need to let the publisher know your experience along these lines. How many people came to your last conference? Oh, well, I've never had a conference before. What about teaching? How many students do you teach when you travel around and teach? Well, I haven't done that before. Now, these are the things, in fact, if you have a book that you're going to promote in some way that is not familiar to you yet, you may want to establish yourself in that area before you write the book so that you have that credential to show the publisher.
Okay, because I'm a little confused, because isn't one of the reasons you want to get the publisher to publish your book is because you don't know how to do promotion. You don't have promotion, sales, marketing. Everything. It almost sounds like you're describing, like if you successfully write this promotion plan, you might as well forget the publisher and just do it yourself.
Unfortunately, in today's publishing climate, you need to be prepared and take responsibility for promoting your book, whether you go with a traditional royalty publisher, a fee-based POD publisher, or whether you self-publish. Publishers today, even the traditional royalty publishers, sure, they're going to spend money and effort promoting their top sellers. And when you get to that place, then they'll put that effort into your book too. But basically what they're going to do for you is they'll make sure that your book gets a few reviews. They have certain list of reviewers that they will send your book to. They will put your book in their catalog and send that out several times a year. They will put your book on their website, so there may just be certain amount of promotion that they do for your book, and you get to do the rest of it.
So it really just comes down to who pays the printer. If you pay the printer, you're a self-publisher. If they pay the printer, then you're being traditionally published. It seems like you're doing all the work anyhow.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And so that's why you sometimes may decide that self-publishing is better for you, because you get all the profit. You don't have to wait for royalty check every quarter that is only anywhere from 5 to 15% of the face value of your book, or what your book sold for. So if it sold at a wholesale price, that may be the percentage that you get.
Now, how important is this market analysis? That was, I think, the next one in the line. Now, what all is that? It's like if I write a book about golf, I want to tell you how many people play golf.
The market analysis, that would be comparing your book with other books that are on the market. And so what you want to find for this section are books that are as close to the book that you're coming out with as possible. And most of us will say, oh, but there's nothing out there like my book.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Is that good? Yeah, is it good if there's nothing out there like it?
Not necessarily. It could be that there isn't a market for that book, and that's why there isn't a book out there like that book. However, if you have a book that you want to write on learning how to golf, for instance, you mentioned golfing, then find other books on how to learn how to golf, and if there are several, and there really aren't that many readers to go around for another 2 or 3 books on this topic, you might come up with another idea. For instance, you may decide that there is a market for a book because nobody has done a book on pro golfers once they retire. I don't know, or golfing in a certain community. You might do some regionals, golfing in Georgia, golfing in Florida, and these may be regional.
Where there just isn't, there's some competition, but not a lot.
Yes, I don't know what the answer would be, but you need to do the research to find out what the right combination might be. And
again, you need to do the research because the publisher is not going to?
Oh, yes, that's true. And I wonder, in the early years, we used to not have to write a book proposal. I've been writing for publication for 30 years, and it used to be that it seemed that the publisher did that work or just knew what was out there. And probably that's because we didn't have the multitude of books that we have now. Competition for a writer, for an author, is tremendous. And that's another reason that it's really important to have your ducks in a row as far as promotion goes.
All right. Now, about the author. Now, how do I go, it's easy if you're like Hillary Clinton, or maybe it's easy where you've been writing for 30 years. How do I, as like a first-time author, convince the publisher I'm the one?
Well, one way is your expertise in the subject. And if it is a nonprofit, if it is a nonfiction book, probably you have some expertise in this subject. So that would be one way to convince the publisher you have information and experience as far as the subject matter goes that no one else has. The other thing that he's going to want to know is that you can write. And one way that you can show him that is through any correspondence that you have with the publisher. Whether you send him a quick little email or you send the whole book proposal, everything should be at a professional level, a professional writing level.
Okay. Now we get down to the chapter outline. Okay, is that like what it sounds like? Is that obvious, or is there something we need to know there that goes in the chapter outline?
It seems obvious to me and to you that, yes, you would start with Chapter 1, you would give your title, and for a nonfiction book, titles of your chapters as well as the title of your book, or at least your subtitle, should say what the book is about. Chapter title should say what that chapter is about. If you use fancy words, fancy titles like you would for fiction, perhaps, it's going to be confusing and it just doesn't work well. So titles are important.
Okay.
You have your title, and then you're going to describe that chapter, what's in that chapter, what it includes. If there's something quite unique in that chapter, well, go ahead and offer bullets to tell exactly what is included in that chapter that is particularly unique.
Okay. That sort of leads into the next question there. As far as the sample chapter that you all pick, do you just automatically do the first chapter, or the one that's the most exciting, or the best, or the most unique, or?
I like to usually do the first and maybe the second chapter. If there's an introduction, I like to include the introduction, perhaps, in my book proposal and the first chapter. And then whatever chapter seems to really tell the story that you're trying to tell or make the point that you're trying to make in your book.
Okay. Now, you mentioned introduction. Now, it just came to my mind that, say, you're not the most famous person in the world, but you happen to know somebody that's very famous that would be willing to write an introduction. Is that something that goes into the proposal?
Sure. Yes, it certainly could. I like to include what I call an enhancement page in my book proposal, and this would include any well-known people that I'm going to be interviewing for my book, organizations that will be mentioned in my book, and, of course, anybody who's going to write the testimonials for the back cover, and anyone who would introduce the book for you. And if you have something in mind, for instance, I wrote a book on fathering and fatherhood, and I wanted to have a picture of a father with his child at the beginning of each chapter. So I would mention that in my enhancements page.
Now, what do you do once you get this all done? Here I'm up in just out of curiosity, before that, how long does a book proposal usually take to write?
Well, the book I just wrote that you mentioned, I indicate that it can take 8 days. And the reason I did that is I taught an online course, 8-week course. And each element of the proposal, well, some elements of the proposal were combined into a session, but others took up one session. And I thought, if you worked on this proposal for 8 days straight, you could actually finish it, especially if you've written one before. Once you write a book proposal, then you have pretty much a template for other proposals, and they will fall into order much quicker.
Okay, so then now what do we do that it's all complete? I've got everything here, 1 to 10, 1 to 20, whatever it is. I got nice stationery. I've printed all out. I got big envelopes and everything. What do I do now?
Well, I'd say you'd better send it off to the publisher, but hopefully you have pinpointed your publisher before you even started writing the book proposal. Publishers, there are thousands of them now, and a lot of people don't realize that. They don't think that they could get in with the big 6 publishers, so they give up. There are thousands of publishers out there, and many of them are looking for good, solid selling books, not necessarily blockbuster books, but books that are going to sell and make the author and the publisher some money. Publishers also specialize, and you are going to want to find a publisher that absolutely publishes and is interested in books of the type that you're writing, of that topic or of that style, or both. It would be even better if it was both. Probably want to pinpoint that publisher before you write the book proposal so that when you're writing it, you have that publisher in mind.
But now we get to the point where the letters start coming back, and it's every place you read, people get rejections, right? I mean, like some of the publishers aren't even polite enough to send a letter back to you rejecting you.
That's true.
How many rejections are enough, and how many are too many? I mean, like when do you call it quits and say, look, I'm either going to do it myself or I'm not going to do it. I'll just come up with another book.
That's a good question, and the answer probably lies within each author. And I say that because we all have a point where we have to go with our intuition and decide when it is enough. I think that if you're getting letters back and they are somewhat encouraging, for instance, in fact, I've been getting them for a book that I've been sending around recently, and I am told this is well written. This has all the elements that it needs for this type of a book. However, we've done something similar, or our publishing list is full, or something like that. So that is encouraging, and I would say keep looking. If you're not getting that kind of feedback, you may consider, and you're getting rejections, you may consider revising your book, refocusing your book. Maybe you need to have an advisor or an editor take a look at it. Hopefully you've already had an editor look at it before you sent it to the publisher. Of course, we're talking about manuscript when I talk about editor. Mm-hmm. Your book proposal wouldn't hurt to have an editor, but not as crucial as your manuscript. Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me a little bit about Spawn. That's how I actually ran into you all initially.
That's right. I am the president of Spawn, which is Small Publishers, Artists, and Writers Network. It's an organization 9 years old already, about 9.5 years old, and we started out as in face-to-face meetings, in communities, and the Internet started taking over, so we had to go that route. Nobody was coming to the meetings anymore, so now we meet online, and we are kind of a trade organization for people who are interested in publishing, mm-hmm. whether they're artists, authors, freelance writers, and we offer information, resources, and a lot of support, yes.
All right. Now, just that we've been talking about your book, let's see, How to Write a Successful Book Proposal in 8 Days or Less. Where do I go about getting a copy of this book?
Well, you can get it from my publishing, or from my website, or from Amazon.com, and my website address is www.matillahapress.com. Matillaha is an unusual word, so if you just type in my name, Patricia Fry, you'll probably be sent right to my publishing company website. That's probably the easiest way.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for coming on the show today, Patricia. I know I learned something here today, and hopefully we'll have you back on another day.
Well, thank you for having me.
Take care now. For Publishing Basics Radio and selfpublishing.com, this is Ron Pramschufer. See you next week.